Hello again. This is kind of a continuation to part 5 that ends right there. And you may have seen that. So I'm going to call this part 6. It's not going to focus so much on what this mini-series was about, which was essentially to make the background transparent on something like a tree. But what I wanted to show you is how I created some of these skies that you see at the end or at the beginning of this one. There was also another interesting looking sunlit sky, and let me see, where else do I have a couple of examples on our website at the showcase. In the showcase area you'll see some scenes here with some interesting looking colorful skies, and I wanted to just give you some ideas on how to do this. And I think we have already one little tutorial that we did a couple of weeks ago, and but now that we have there it is. So now that we have the artist edition 8.2 on DAS, I wanted to create another tutorial, and this one's dedicated to the folks the artists that use any of the products at DAS, including Carrara, Bryce, and DAS Studio, and even software that is not from DAS, but that you can find there as well. And of course, if you use PD Pro Artist Edition, you may have gotten it there. What you see here is another example with a little bit of reddish skies and cloud patterns, and the thing that's really interesting with that is that it's actually created with our 3D designer, which is classically, more typically used for terrains. You basically, you're looking at mountains up here, mountains in the sky. So let me get started and show you how to do some of that. Right. The idea is that you will have eventually a scene inside your image. And part of the scene will be below the horizon, and that's where you'll see your mountain or your hills or your lakes and some other stuff on the ground. And then you'll have above that line, above the horizon, you'll see your sky, and we'll focus on that as well. So we'll have two parts really. We'll use the 3D designer for the bottom part, the mountains, but we'll also use the 3D designer in a separate rendering path to create the sky, and then we'll just need to worry about how to composite these two together. So let's have a look at how to create the sky. Basically, we'll start with in a very similar way to what we do with the creating of terrains. We will create an elevation map, and that might be something like the plasma noise. So let's take a look at that from the render submenu under the filters. And I am using the artist edition here, so you won't see any animation capabilities in this particular tutorial. And what I'll do is I'll make it a little bit smaller. Let's give it 6 or 7 here. You can click that a few times until you get some sort of a nice little pattern, some patchy clouds, a little bit denser, and so on. Now let's OK that, keep it grayscale, and let's go and store that. You never know, you might need that again, so let's keep it there and put that aside. Next thing we'll do is we'll go and perhaps do a little bit of filtering at the curve level here, filter adjust curves, to do what we would typically with an elevation map for terrain, which is to bring it down a little bit here and up a little bit on that side, so to have kind of a little bit of a mesa or some canyon lands. Now that's something that you want to do particularly for the terrain, but it actually turns out to be quite useful also for the sky. Try with, try without, try with different parameters, and to see where it takes you. This is really a fun thing to experiment with. So let's go OK that and store that one. You never know, might need that as well. So let's go back to that a little bit later. All right, so now that we have that, let's go and turn this into a 3D elevation. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go to filter, and in the filter area we can go to transform and 3D designer. So that's where your new 3D designer tool is. That one has existed since some of the 7.0, 7.2 releases, but only in 8.0, and then subsequently 8.2 did we add GPU support. So there are more options, more features. And that's as of 8.0. But now with 8.2, we also have the support for the GPU. So that means your manipulation, your interactive visualization here is going to be much, much faster. If you have, that is, a good graphics card, and you have support for, I don't know, DirectX 11, I suppose, or something like that. There's all sorts of some description on the website that tell you what it is you need for it to actually work. Most systems nowadays have a fairly decent graphic card, and the capability under Windows 7 or Windows 8 to actually support the GPU. This will not work under XP or under Vista. I mean, it will work, but it won't be that fast. It won't be accelerated through the GPU. All right, so what we'll do is we'll take a look at it, but we'll flatten it down. Not all the way. A little bit of structure is okay. And then we'll also move the lighting a little bit around. But now comes the magic trick. Instead of keeping this on the ground for the terrain, we'll move it up. So the way to do that is that you can go and grab the move elements here. X moves it sideways, Y moves it up and down. Now that's one thing, and then you can also change the pitch to actually flip it down to the other side. So let's do a little bit of both, right? Let's move it so that we are appearing to look at this from underneath, and we may still want to move it up a little bit more. We can also adjust the camera here for a bit more distortion on that perspective view, and we could still also move it back or closer, and we can always do that fine adjustment a little bit later. You might want to see how it's kind of showing the edge here. You might want to scale it sideways. So now we're looking at the scale amount here. Let's go to scale like so, and perhaps even a little bit more into the depth, into distance, right? And then at that point you might want to actually move it to the back. Somewhere around there is where we want to be, right? Now let's go and look at it as if it were still a terrain. That means amplitude back up, and that looks kind of odd, right? But guess what? We will want to have a little bit of elevation, because what we're going to do is add some fog that's going to break through here. Now that's going to be the step in about 2 or 3 minutes. What we want to do next is to position the light source maybe where the sun is going to hit the clouds from underneath. So imagine you're doing a scene where around here on the left side the sun is going to eventually be. You'll probably want to have that bright spot of the light somewhere around there. You don't want it on the right side. You want it somewhere around there on the left. Now how much of that specular highlight you want, that's something you can control. You can change the intensity here of the overall lighting, but also of the specular part itself. So you can play with that, and you can change how much that specular highlight is spread by making it softer or harder. You can play with that a little bit. And of course this doesn't look very much like a red sunset yet, but we're about to change that, because what we're going to do is change the color. So this is light color 1. Hey, let's just make it kind of a reddish, even a reddish purple, kind of one of those, right? Now we have the sun shining underneath it just at sunset or slightly after sunset. Let's give it perhaps a little bit less of that, maybe more of that orange kind of look. Now you have another light source. You can also place that one somewhere. And maybe you still have some parts where you see the sky break through. Now what I'd like to do actually with that is to use the fog. One thing you can do is you can set the color of the sky right here, the background color, which right now is black. Let's set this to a different color. Let's make that I don't know, something more bluish, perhaps a little bit on the dark side already, but something like this. And so now the next trick is to make it look like some of that blue color is actually shining through or showing through some of these currently opaque clouds. And so what we'll do is we'll simply raise the fog level. Now I'm not talking about the fog level here. This will work too for the horizon, right? You have a little bit of a fog you want to show there, perhaps to blend it. But what I really need is the ground fog, because remember what the ground fog does. If this were still the terrain this way, right, the ground fog, first of all you click here to enable it, linear or non-linear mode, either way will work. And then you say, okay, let's go and increase it up, click here on red, and now you can adjust how much of that fog is showing through from underneath it. There you go, that's the one I'm talking about. All right, so imagine something like this, and then flatten it down. You're now back to where the clouds were, right? So this is, flip it upside down, and you're getting closer to where we want to be. So at that point, you can still adjust a little bit here, perhaps not give it too much of that amplitude, and perhaps also, oh, I don't know, perhaps the hardness is too high, give it a little bit softer, something like that. Light range, reduce that, so you get a little bit of a darkening, like a shadowy look on those big clouds, and that's where you can really have fun trying to get it exactly the way you want. Look at that. So now this may be just one level of cloud, and maybe you need another level, a higher elevation, cirrus clouds or something different, maybe a little cumulonimbus or some other type of clouds underneath it or above it. And the trick is simply to then do a compositing with the color on blue. So I would, for instance, store this one, right? And in fact, before you do that, there's one more parameter you can play with, and that's the pre-filter. If you make it go all the way to the right at 100%, it's going to be a little bit softer, right? More washed out. And then if you go to the left at 0, it's going to be very detailed, possibly grainy, but it's going to give you a little bit more of that very high special detail. And sometimes that works just perfectly. So find your karma here, find your best place, and then okay that. Perhaps one more little thing here on the cloud color. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's so many different ways to get it, right? And what I'll do is I'll go and, oh, you know what? Maybe the moon is shining on the right side. Maybe we are on a planet with two stars, two suns, right? So there's going to be kind of a red star and a blue star, and we're going to have them side by side here. So let's do that and okay that. All right, so that's once okay. Let's go and store this image because I'm sure we're going to need that again. Let's store this image copy, and there you go. And then we'll do the same thing again, but with a slightly different pattern and different lighting effects, and perhaps smaller parts or whatnot, just to have another one that we can composite. So let me do that quickly. We'll go again to filter, transform. No, not transform. First we need to render some sort of a pattern. This time we'll still use the plasma noise. Of course, there's other ways to generate some sort, but I'll make it a little bit smaller this time. And I'll go to the what is it? This time, this time I want to do the curves just to see what that does, because we need to experiment and explore and learn from that, even if we make mistakes. Next thing we'll want to do then is to filter, transform 3D Designer. And as a 3D designer look, it still remembers the original, the most recent settings, all the parameters here. But this time what we'll do is we'll increase the, let's see, what do we increase? Increase a little bit how much we have on that elevation. Increase, oh, I don't know, the rotation of this. Now this we need to keep the same because the light is affected by that. The lighting goes with it. Oh, the fog. Let's go and increase the fog so we have fewer of those clouds showing. But then also increase the low part of the fog so it's kind of, look at that. Look at that. We can have it really just a tiny little bit of that showing. Okay, so get it the way you want there. Make sure it's not too elevated there, right? Just a little bit. There you go. Okay, that's the way. And then perhaps work again with the pre-filter with more detail, or fluff it out. Change a little bit on. Oh, look at that. That's nice too. Higher elevation clouds will be brighter. So we can do all sorts of different things. So we have really a distinction between the higher elevation clouds and the lower elevation. All right, so let's keep that. Don't need to be too picky about this. Oh wait, no, I'm still picky. So let's move it down here. Let's see if we can move it down a little bit. Yeah, that'll be just fine, like so. Okay, okay that. And now we have those two images. So we could store this one here, and we can look at them side by side. Oops. So we got this one here. That will be one level of cloud. And then we have this one, another level of clouds. And so what we want to do is now composite the two together. And of course, the wrong way to do it is to simply say, okay, I got, let's say, click here to put this one in, or click here to put that one in. Well, how about we put them in two different layers, or two different, like swap buffer, main buffer, and combine them? Well, that would work. We could probably do that with the proper keying. In fact, let's try that. Let's go to image, jump to the other buffer, right? And wait, that was a copy. Let's rather do a jump to it. So jump to the other buffer. We're looking at the swap buffer. You can see here in the upper left corner. And I'm going to copy that in here. And then so now I can jump back. I'm going to use the shortcut J for jump and make sure that the keyboard focus is on that. Right, so we got the two here. I'm going to move this aside. So we got this one here and we got this one here. Now if I click here, it's going to combine them both together. Ooh, interesting colors, but that's not what I'm looking for. I don't want the green in the sky here. So right click and see if you have other options. There's going to be other blending modes you can combine. Screen might work at times. Yep, there's a nice interesting one where you have them both. And sometimes, especially if you have a very different contrast or brightness or colors, different hues between one layer of clouds and the other layer of clouds, that will be a good way to combine them. Now it might be too bright, so maybe at that point, if you do decide to keep that together, to merge this with swap, you might want to reduce that a little bit. Let's go and hold on a second. Okay, that's better. I'm back. We had a noisy aircraft here going over our house. Didn't want to record that. So, things we could do here is perhaps expand the dynamic range so it gets a little bit darker on the sky. But let's have a look at another method. Okay, so I'm going to put this one back in here and then jump to this one. That one's still there. And so what I'll do, instead of combining them like so, and we're not done with that option too, because there are still many other levels you could combine here. Soft light, and see if that works better, right? So plenty of modes to explore there. There's probably about 30 or so different combination or layer modes, blending modes. But one thing that I was thinking, maybe we could just filter and combine the two, right? Mixing the two buffers, or combining at these levels, luminance based or based on or additive or multiply. There's all sorts of different ways here. So explore with that and see, for instance, if you want to have this sky level or this one, or a little bit of both, right? So that's what you do with that. Let's say, for instance, we try another one. Combine. Let's see, XOR. No, not likely. Let's see what else we have here. Combine, difference, luminance. Ooh, that one's interesting. Look at that. Let's zoom in on that a little bit. Yeah, look at that. Now we see the white higher elevation clouds, but then they're being covered by the reddish, which now appear to be a lower elevation. That's really good. That's a nice effect. All right, and so that's basically what I want to show you, how you can experiment with these to create your own beautiful sunset skies, or different planetary looks, and then of course it's just a matter of adding something on the foreground, which you can do in many different ways. I'm just going to finish here a little bit just to see what we could do, perhaps to keep this a little bit transparent. There you go. Let's go store that, right, one more time. Store this image, and now let's work on our foreground and have some terrains there. So not very different, just the same thing as we did for the clouds. We'll render something like plasma noise. This time we'll make it a little bit bigger again, and we'll also go and darken it in the front here to make it a little bit more of a valley. So there's a couple of ways we could do that. We could go with the linear gradient tool, which goes from black to white, or from white to black. And so what I'll do is I'll go, let's see, that's not exactly what I need. I need to change my gradient. Hold on for a second here. I'm going to go to the gradient and say at the end it's fully transparent. So let's go to the opacity channel, right? So I did go to P for playtime here, sweep editor, that's the tool. And then here I'm selecting the opacity channel to make sure I'm bringing it all the way down, and all the way down here on the left as well. Smooth it, click on this little smoothing icon here a few seconds, and then that way when you use the gradient tool, it's not going to modify the area, the pixels outside of the gradient area that I'm drawing. So now I can do perhaps something like this. Nope, that's not it. I want to go more like that. Yeah, kind of the darkening and then bright. Well, I don't know. There's so many different ways to work with that. Let's try this. All right. And then, no, you know what? Let's paint it. This is a paint program. Let's go grab a big brush and paint that. So for instance, we can go and say, let's go grab a brush about this big, right? Let's show it with the selection mask here in overlay mode. Let's blur it, selection and Gaussian blur alpha. There you go, something like so. And let's pick that up as a custom brush, right? So user selected as custom brush. So now I have that. I can preview it here and see it in my custom brush. And what I want to do is not paint over this. I want to darken it. So I need to set the brush style or the brush mode. Let's go and undo this. Let's go and darken it simply by giving it the brush mode. There it is, to say subtract, right? If you subtract, it gets darker and darker. Really quick, by the way. So we want to reduce the opacity a little bit, so it's not doing that too quickly. Let's go something like very tiny little bit. So we have plenty of time to think about it and go a bit darker somewhere where we want it darker. And keep in mind, why am I doing this darker and darker? Well, because this represents the elevation. This is going to be our elevation map. You could in fact go and draw some canyons and riverbeds and stuff like that. So let's see, one more thing we want to do is give it our adjustment now for a few canyon level effects. So let's go to the curves and apply that curve, flattening the plateau here for kind of a canyon lands, and then coming down on a steep slope. All sorts of different ways to work with that, depending on what kind of landscape you want. You might want to also kind of create levels, right? So that it's almost like different stages of the mesas. So it doesn't go just gradually, but kind of in steps. So one way you can do that is with one of the filters on the sharpen side. There is an art sharpen tool, and with that you can see now it's already kind of created a little bit of a leveling, and you can make it quite extensive there. So maybe we'll do that, but then say, well, maybe not quite that much. So let's go undo that interactively. That's the interactive undo, and kind of find a good spot somewhere in between. And so let's see what that does for a terrain, right? We have some brighter areas which will be higher elevation in the back, and dark which will be the deep valley in the front. So let's go and turn that into the same tool that we used for the clouds. This time we'll use the 3D designer for the terrain. And it still remembers the settings we had for the clouds though. So one thing we need to do is get the elevation up, reduce the cloud, or maybe simply extinguish the fog there, and flip it back down to the bottom. And so now you can see how we have some nice high mountains in the back. We don't need it tilted. We probably could work a little bit on that as well. And then let's see, okay, something like that. Now we can also bring the fog that's in the background a little bit forward, and so that we actually have this kind of fade towards the back. But we'll do even more so as we blend it together with the rest. The sky, the color of the lights is still good. We may want to move this back a little bit. You know, all sorts of different ways to work that and make it do magic. So let's say, well, let's just use this. Let's say we have a big valley in the front, and then we have that. Let's fill it in with a little bit of fog from the ground though. So let's go something like this. We just need to bring it back down, and something like so. Oh, I think we still have too much of that. Alright, so maybe something like so. Let's try, what was that, linear? Yeah, and that's still not much better. You know what? That really, well, actually that's okay. This will work. We have some, maybe this is some ocean area or whatnot. Hey, yeah, look at that, some seas, some lakes. So, you know, let's go like so, and see if we can get rid of that tilt we have here. Seems like we have a tiny little angular tilt here. That'll be good enough. Let's go bring it down also. There you go. Let's bring the fog farther away. Oh, you know what? Maybe I'm too close also. Let's see if I can... yeah, there's still more I can get into that scene. So let's see about the scaling. I want that to be really looking like a very far distance. So something like this. Reduce the fog some more. There you go. Okay. So now this terrain though goes up too high. The clouds, the sky we had, were coming down pretty low. So we probably don't want to have the clouds that high, or the terrains that high. Let's bring it down a little bit, something like so. Did I get this right on the tilt? I want it flat. All right, so we need to have a reset. Now, but if we reset everything here, oh, let's see. It's probably this one, the bank. Let's go reset the bank. Yep, there it is. Okay, perfect. We got these buttons. These are new too, relatively new. You can reset the XYZ for the position on the move, and the heading, the P for pitch, and the B for bank. All right, so with that, I think we're almost done. Let's see the scale in the x-axis, maybe a little bit more like so. Get the fog up there. That's probably better. Yep, something like so. And the pre-filter right now it's very blurry, and if we go this way it's just going to be a little bit too much noise, but that's where you can go and play somewhere in between, right? Something like this. And I don't know, maybe we can still work on that lighting effect there with wherever the sun is shining. Reduce the hardness, so I think we're good on that. And increase the hardness. You know what, if you want the sky to look like it's shining also, you can add that a little bit more, or you can reduce it and say no, the sun is the only one, or the stars are the only one contributing to that illumination effect. So all sorts of different lighting effects that you can create with that too. Let's go and call this the way we want it. Okay, that may not have been on the recorded area, but I'm sure you follow me on that. We've done this a few times now. So we now have the terrain, and I'm going to store that. And we also have one of the cloud levels. Actually, no, this one here that we combine both clouds level. So let's use that. Let's do this one, and then we need to combine the terrain. So how do we do that? All right, so we have this one. Let me undo quickly. And we have the terrain here. Let me do a store image. So we have these two. Again, we want to combine the two together. This one. Oh no, wait, that's wrong one here. This one here, and that's this one. Yeah. Right. Okay, so here's the terrain and here's the cloud patterns, and I want to combine them together in such a way that we can see this one kind of, you know, it's fading here with the mist, but we want it still visible before the sky, and the sky needs to disappear behind it. So what we can do is we can put this one into the background, again into the swap buffer, and this one into the foreground. Right. So let's see. Right now I'm on the main buffer. I'm going to switch over. That's again J for jump. There it is. And I already had it. No, this is the one we want. Let's combine this one, right? Let's take a look. Yeah, that's just a single layer of clouds. We want the combination with the two. And then we click here and go back, jump back to this one. Right, so that's the terrain. If we combine them together, if we merge them or show them together, we can tell where they are. Pretty good lineup, not perfect, it doesn't have to be necessarily though. But what it is, if we don't want to combine them this way, what we do need to do is kind of define an area where one is going to be allowed but the other one is not, where it's going to basically do a transition, so a limit to blending it. Right, so what we can do is we have this tool called the selection fader. And that's basically going to allow us to select the area that's going to gradually transition from being selected to not selected. So for instance, if I did that from here, I could go down and then suddenly be non-selected. Not what I want to do. Let's undo that. And what I'll do instead, I'll say a little bit closer here. I want to go perhaps from this part down. And I want to go really close to that terrain. So now I fade from this area, I'm fading down, and eventually I have no selection at all. Right, now what can you do with that selection? Well, you could basically rub through the sky that's already there. You can do that with the rub through mode. Maybe they will cover that in a different tutorial, but you can also do that with the filter and simply combining the two together, again with the mix buffer for instance. But this time this filtering will only occur where the selection was allowed. So that's why we did that selection, to gradually disappear as we reach the horizon and go down there. So then we only see parts of the sky and it's disappearing into this area. And by the way, I still have that pink effect showing because of the selection overlay mode here. If I turn that off, it's going to look much better. All right, so at that point I do have my combined terrain and sky, and remember all of these were done with the same tool. And really in space there is no upside down or up and above and down. It's all the same. So it goes to prove that you can create clouds with a terrain generator. And of course we need to still have the sun here somewhere, so let's finish this with maybe the nova option. Let's say a big 16 nova, and select kind of a reddish tint and maybe a lightly green tint with the right and the left button here. And so the one sun is going to be right over here. Let's put that a few times. That looks okay, but not my favorite. I'm going to go undo that, and instead I'm going to use my good old lens flares. And with the lens flares you have some more magic. Let's see, we can for instance use this one to put the lens flare right there. Right, and then remember we had the other sky, the other star that was here somewhere, a white star, a supernova. Let's put that there. So now we got two. All right. So thanks for watching. Hope to have helped you give you some ideas on how to create some of these scenes and explore more capable features that lurk under the what's the right word for that? The lurk here in Dog Waffle. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon again in another tutorial of PD Artist or PD Howler.